We have reached the start of the second half of the season, which means there's only about, 35-40% of the year left to go because math, that's how that works. We've got another set of FAAB recommendations for you here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik, Halterman, and Ryan Boyer here with another Saturday FAAB podcast episode for you. Ryan, we'll get into the names soon, but first, are you ready to be taken over by the swing off? Are you excited? Are we going to lobby to bring the swing off to all the games of the second half? Just replace the actual baseball?
Do we think that's actually going to come to real games at some point?
Because after seeing how it was received, I'd kind of be surprised if we don't get there eventually.
I mean, it's certainly arguably better than the Ghost Runner at second in extra innings. So, yeah, maybe it will be brought to actual games. We'll see. That was exciting though, for sure.
Yeah, I loved it in the All-Star game. I think it was the perfect way to resolve that. If you've decided we're not going to play extra innings, might as well have a bit of fun. The idea that real games could end with the pitching staff just being taken completely out of the mix, that seems a little unfair. I mean, imagine a future where you're a pitching first team, and then suddenly the rules change and say every game that's tied after 10 or 9 or 12 or whatever it is, pitchers don't matter anymore. That doesn't seem very fair.
Maybe if you get to like the 15th inning or something, then we can go to a swing off.
I think my compromise would be let's play 3 innings of regular baseball, no zombie runner, and at the end of that, fine. Over in the KBO, I know they play 3 innings of regular baseball, and if it's tied after that, it's just a tie. That would, of course, be my preference, but I don't think we're going to sell any people on ties in the MLB fan community, unfortunately. But should we get to some of the headlines today? We've got a mix of news to talk about before we move on to our priority ads of the week. Starting with Ketel Marte. Bit of an unusual and somewhat sad story here. His home was broken into over the All-Star break, and he is heading to the restricted list for a few days. Not sure if he's going to be out long enough for any other players to be worth picking up for fantasy purposes, but at the very least, got to keep an eye on Marte's status for his whether or not you want to put him in the lineup for next week.
Yeah, speaking of swing off, unfortunately, the home broken into over the All-Star break. I feel like that's become a kind of a thing across all sports. Didn't was it Travis Kelce had his broken into during the Pro Bowl or something? I guess some people know that you're going to be away and try to take advantage of that, but that's unfortunate. And I don't think I know Torey Lovullo said he is not expecting a long absence, but we don't know exactly when he's going to be back. Blaze Alexander started at second base for the Diamondbacks on Friday. He was interesting for about 5 minutes last season. But yeah, it doesn't seem like he's going to be a fixture in the lineup for a long time. So I don't think there's necessarily anything actionable here. Just keep an eye on Ketel Marte's status. I assume he's probably going to be okay to start the upcoming week, but yeah, just keep an eye on news there.
Yeah, may have to keep him out through the early part of the week in some of those leagues where you get Monday and Friday lineups, but hopefully we'll see him back by Monday. Nice of the Diamondbacks to give him a couple days off to do what he needs to do there. Other news, we've got a hamstring strain for Sal Frelick of the Brewers. Just a grade 1 strain, though. This happened, he was diagnosed over the break. The injury would have happened just before the break. An injury suffered in Sunday's game against the Nationals. A lot of injuries, especially if they're grade 1 right around this time, they can be backdated, right? So that we could be seeing IL placements that say 10 days, but are really only 7, which is the reason why I did not go put Sal Frelick's replacements on the deep league ads. But if you were to pick up somebody for a week, Ryan, Blake Perkins, Jake Bowers?
Yeah, it was Bowers in. I think he started in right field, and they shifted, or he started in left field, or started in right field, and they shifted Isaac Collins over to the. Either way, Jake Bowers started. I can't remember.
Yeah, Bowers in left, Collins in right yesterday versus Tyler Glasnow.
I mean, I think maybe the most interesting thing about this is that it's Bryce Terang went back up to the leadoff spot. That could give him a little short-term boost. He had been kind of down hitting 5, 6, 7 for a while. He began the season hitting leadoff and quickly lost, or not quickly, but eventually lost that job and hitting lower in the lineup. Could give him a little boost for in the short term while he's hitting leadoff. But yeah, as you mentioned, hopefully a short-term stint on the IL for Frelick. They didn't rule out not putting him on there at all. They wanted to check his status prior to Friday's game before they made a decision on the IL. So that leads you to believe that we'll have a good shot to come back once his 10 days are up. And I think that'll be like next Wednesday or something like that. I might have off for around a day or two, but yeah. We'll be without Sal Frelick at least at the beginning of next week, but he should be back. Should be back soon. He's having a nice season for the Brewers, so fantasy managers will be hopeful that it is indeed a short stint and he doesn't have a setback.
Yeah, Frelick hitting 294, 17 steals, and a respectable 7 homers, already more than double his previous career high of 3. Moving on to the next bit of injury news, we've got Thairo Estrada of the Rockies hitting the IL with a thumb sprain. This is another one where the injury happened just before the break, and he's having a backdated IL stint here. Probably doesn't necessarily have to be out very long if this is just a jammed thumb. Obviously, could end up being multiple weeks, but in leagues deep enough to have already been holding on to Thairo Estrada, I guess you could probably hold him on here. It's just a little bit too bad that this was going to be still in the middle of that really great stretch for the Rockies, I believe, where they're either at home or in great hitters' parks. So you're missing out on a good week from Thairo Estrada here, but can probably hold on to him in most deep formats.
Yeah, I think so. And I have a handful of shares of Thairo Estrada. It's been pretty good. He's the counting stats of he hasn't provided much in that area, but strikeout rate's down. He's hitting it for a good batting average, receiving that Coors Field boost there. And I think he could be useful down the stretch as a middle infield option. So hopefully he'll be back. He'll be back soon. And Ezequiel Tovar, who you'll be speaking about a little more in depth, he is back from the IL to take Estrada's spot on the active roster. So Rockies get a little boost there. Tovar not having a great season, especially from a power perspective, way down. He's been injured a handful of times, but as you mentioned, Rockies are in the middle of a favorable stretch of their schedule, so you want to get Tovar back in your lineups if you have him.
Yeah, I'll be talking about Tovar and his appeal in shallower formats in a bit. He's still held on to in pretty much all of the deeper leagues, I would imagine. One more bit of injury news to discuss here. Stephen Kwan, this one's just day-to-day for now. He was out of the lineup yesterday against the A's due to a right wrist injury, something he actually received an injection for on Wednesday. So while this is being called day-to-day, if it's serious enough to receive some sort of injection, it doesn't seem like it's the minorest of minor injuries here for Stephen Kwan. So if you do have him and no extra outfielders on the bench, probably want to pick one up this weekend.
Yeah, and it's given that he had the entire All-Star break to recover from that injury, and that still wasn't enough, and they decided an injection was needed. That leads you to believe that it could potentially be longer than a day-to-day situation. Nolan Jones moved over to left field. They started Jonathan Rodriguez yesterday in right. He actually hit a home run. He's a legitimate prospect. I don't know if we can still call him a prospect. Hasn't done much at the major league level to this point, but he could be. I think if it turns out that Quan does wind up needing an IL stint, perhaps a lengthier absence, Jonathan Rodriguez probably would fit potentially in our deeper league ads. He's interesting enough in that regard. So keep an eye on that situation.
Yeah, Rodriguez has hit the ball hard in 35 career Major League games across 2 seasons, a 55% hard hit rate, but a 32% strikeout rate so far. The lack of contact has won out. He has just a 496 OPS, but there could be something there. Just 35 games. One more injury to talk about. Grayson Rodriguez has had a setback. He experienced elbow discomfort. It's actually not an elbow issue. He's started the year with elbow inflammation. Then it moved to a lat strain. Now it's elbow discomfort. Making sure I have this all right for Grayson Rodriguez because his injury tag still says lat, but this isn't actually new elbow issues this year either. And at this point, I think this is the sign that you can let go of Grayson Rodriguez if you're holding on to him this long after he had started, his bullpens in late June and kept ramping up throughout July. All right, maybe in some leagues it made sense to stash him because, hey, if he came back and was himself, sure, that would help you. At this point, with him being shut down from throwing again, the absolute best case scenario, let's imagine he was shut down for 1 week. Then he's still probably 6 weeks away from there. We're talking mid-September in the best case. Yeah. And even then, it's, 2 starts where he's not fully ramped up. So I see zero reason to hold on to Grayson Rodriguez in any league. The only open questions that remain are just how interested are we going to allow ourselves to be in him next year?
Yeah, just to give you a little peek behind the curtain with RotoWire with our news. I noticed that whoever wrote the Grayson Rodriguez update, you can set them as priority level 1, 2, 3, 4 through 5, and the Grayson Rodriguez setback note only garnered a 3, which is kind of the default, which I guess gives you an idea of how little we should be surprised that he actually had a setback. He's, as you mentioned, dealt with a litany of arm issues. I think there actually might have been a triceps thing mixed in there too. Maybe that was just related to the previous elbow issue. But either way, yeah, optimism for Rodriguez this year has gone from a very little to non-existent. And yeah, we'll see if he winds up needing surgery. Obviously, that would affect his potential appeal for 2026. But very talented arm. Too bad he's not going to get back on the field anytime soon.
Yeah, I forgot it was actually a sore triceps. That was the first sign that something was wrong back in early March. Then the discussion quickly turned to elbow inflammation. So I don't know if he's just dealing with all parts of his arm are breaking at once. You said getting surgery would affect his appeal for next season. I almost feel like if he gets surgery, then I'm back in on him for 2027. And if he doesn't, I think I might let him be somebody else's problem in 2026.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If he goes the rest and rehab route as he has to this point, for next season, you just kind of unfortunately feel like it's just a matter of time before he breaks. But hopefully it's just a minor setback, but it's hard to have any level of optimism with him right now.
All right, we are going to move on to our priority ads right after this message from the NFFC. The NFFC RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship is live. Play fantasy football against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFFC this football season. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFFC Online Championship for a shot at $250,000. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. And welcome back to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer here. Moving on to the main topic of today's show, which is our waiver wire ads. Now, Ryan, there have been just, 2 days worth of games since our last show last weekend. So not a lot has changed. It was a bit of a struggle to put together this week's list of names. I'll throw that out there. And if there's some players that you expected us to talk about and we didn't, it's probably because we just talked about them 1 week ago and we don't like to repeat names every week. But we'll try to go a little deeper and also mention some names again who might be appealing in shallower leagues after we'd only really previously thrown them out for deeper leagues. We'll find our way to get through 20 names here today. Who is your first one on the list?
Got Sean Murphy on quite a power binge of late. 7 home runs, 16 RBI over his last 13 games. He started each of the last 5 games for the Braves and 7 of the last 8. Batted cleanup for them in 6 of 7 of those games before hitting 5th on Friday in the first game after the All-Star break. Hitting the ball very hard, which is a regular Sean Murphy thing. 16% barrel rate this season. He's also got a 26.7% pulled fly ball rate. That ranks 17th out of 249 batted ball qualifiers. 3 of his last 4 starts have been at DH, as the Braves kind of look to get both him and Drake Baldwin in the lineup. I mean, I don't think Marcell Ozuna is going to get outright benched. He's had a down season, certainly. He's still been a pretty productive hitter on the whole, and they would like to trade him this month, I assume. But the main thing there is I think Sean Murphy's playing time concerns probably the biggest question mark with him previously, and I don't know that that's really an issue for him anymore. And he's always had a ton of power. Batting average is likely to continue to be a liability, but I think with the playing time concerns probably not really there anymore, I think he should be owned even in one catcher formats if you need help there. Pick Sean Murphy back up if he has been dropped in your league from an impatient owner.
Yeah, there are a lot of catchers, obviously, in one catcher league, so I would not drop for Sean Murphy. But if you have one of the worst few, I think I certainly would. He's a good player. He just has not had that consistent health and playing time recently. You noted Marcell Ozuna sitting twice in a row. Should point out that that's the final game of the first half and the first game of the second half, which is pretty weird. If there was just a minor unreported injury that kept him down for 2 days back to back, that would be one thing. This seems more like a intentional decision. Maybe that it's going to turn out that there's some sort of injury we're unaware of, but certainly something to keep an eye on there. If you've got Marcell Ozuna and you can't count on him being in the lineup every day, that's a problem. We're going to move on to the next name here, which is a shortstop, but I want to throw in a quick question from the chat here. John says he has lots of pitching, needs a shortstop or third baseman with speed and power. Should I trade either Hunter Brown or Skenes, Paul Skenes, for someone? And if yes, who would be a good target? I would. I'm mentioning this only because there was that news that Paul Skenes could see more shortened outings in the second half. Now, other people in your league may have seen that news too, but there's a chance that Paul Skenes in the second half is not, I don't think they're going to go full 2024 second half Garrett Crochet with him, but there's a chance that he's not quite Paul Skenes. So he might be the one I'd be looking to move. And as for who to target, I think my best advice is don't think of it that way. It doesn't really matter who you want to get if their current owner isn't willing to give them up. What I would do is look for a team that needs pitching and find the best team that needs pitching, or the team with the best shortstop or third baseman with a hole at pitcher. So, but I could get behind trading Paul Skenes because of that news. That's just why I threw this one in there.
Yeah, and also, you mentioned that the fellow fantasy owners could have seen that news as well, but also Skenes presumably is going to have probably a higher value in terms of how their owner sees them. So I don't know. It's you'd be able to probably get more from your with the trade of Skenes, I would think. And the Pirates, it seems like they're still going to target 190, 200-ish innings for Skenes. It might have been a little overblown, but he did throw, fewer than 80 pitches in 3 of his last 4 starts prior to the All-Star break. So they already kind of started scaling back his workload a little bit. I don't think it'll be that extreme, Still think he's obviously a must roster. They're not talking about completely shutting him down, but yeah, I think it would make more sense to shop Skenes around rather than Hunter Brown.
Yeah, so I just look at the teams that were most desperate for pitching and still in contention and try to offer them Paul Skenes for their best third baseman or shortstop, and it better be a really good one to do the deal, even with these worries about his second half workload. But back to the shortstop that I was about to talk about here, Ezequiel Tovar. We mentioned in the intro that with Thairo Estrada out with a thumb sprain, it's Ezequiel Tovar returning from his own injury, an oblique strain, is the corresponding move here. And Ezequiel Tovar is actually still available in more than half of Yahoo leagues. And I wanted to throw him on here because I wanted to ask you, Ryan, is Ezequiel Tovar just a lock, needs to be owned in all shallow formats or not? Because I still don't know if he's all that good. Strikes out way too much, doesn't walk. They did get up to 26 homers last year, but not particularly hard batted ball data, about league average there. Doesn't actually run that much either, 6 steals last season, but everyday playing time at Coors Field from a guy who's just 23 years old and was very much a legitimate prospect. Is this someone to you who needs to be rostered in every shallow league? For example, we had a question: activate Tovar and drop Anthony Volpe. Where roughly would you be ranking Ezequiel Tovar the rest of the season? Because I think that anybody at Coors Field who's playing every day needs to be rostered in a 12-teamer, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I think so. It's tough to say exactly where I would rank him exactly, but it's funny, his season, like, he's striking out quite a bit less, walking a little bit more and hitting the ball harder, but his numbers are way down, especially from a power perspective. I mean, he was kind of out over his skis a little bit last season, I think. But yeah, I think even though the profile isn't ideal, Coors Field boost is just so great that, I think he's a must roster regardless. And as I mentioned before, he's kind of dealt with injuries off and on a lot of the season that could be affecting his numbers as well. So yeah, I don't love the profile with Ezequiel Tovar, but he's still got a lot of things working for him.
How about that Tovar versus Volpe question we had in the chat? I think that one's pretty tough. I think that is roughly where I would think of Tovar as good enough, but not anybody exciting that you feel like you're locked into keeping.
Yeah, it might depend on what exactly you need. Volpe is going to give you more stolen bases. Tovar could potentially give you more power, so it could be more of a needs-based thing. But in a vacuum, I think I would probably lean towards Tovar.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I might side with the park there and lean Tovar, and Volpe just hasn't really taken any noticeable step forward, it seems, this year. But that's a tough call there. Should we move on to our next name, though? Ryan, who do you got?
Yeah, Ramon Laureano, kind of back on the fantasy radar all of a sudden. 16 straight starts for the Orioles. He started 24 the last 25 games for them. Has not hit lower than 5th over his last 21 starts. You look back over those last 16 games he's started, he's slashing 333, 388, 567. A couple home runs, a couple stolen bases. Look back to May 1st, he's got a 906 OPS over that stretch. He's also hitting the ball harder, pretty much harder than he ever has. He's got a 10.2% barrel rate, career high 46.4% hard hit rate. He's also got his strikeout rate down to a more manageable 25.3%. That also would be a career low. He just turned 31, so it's not like Ramon Laureano is ancient. It's possible this is kind of a mid-late-ish career resurgence for him. Not necessarily counting on that, but the opportunity is there. Theoretically, should be part of a pretty good Orioles lineup and hitting in the middle of that. So I think in certainly your deeper formats and even in your shallower ones now, I think Laureano is maybe not must roster, but he's pretty close to there, especially in 5 outfielder formats.
Yeah, I lost you there for a minute, but I can get behind Ramon Laureano as not the most exciting option, but as surprisingly viable even for some of these shallower leagues these days. Let's move on to the next name, who I'm not sure if he's viable or not. That's why I'm going to ask him to you, Ryan. Jordan Walker, he's back. He's back to start the second half. He's actually back from, what was it? Appendicitis was his most recent ailment. It kept him out for a little bit. Actually, he hit the IL, nearly a month ago, back on June 25th with appendicitis. So an unusual ailment for a player to return from, presumably doesn't have the same lingering impacts as, an oblique or a calf or a quad or something like that. So Jordan Walker is now back to start the second half. Is Jordan Walker good enough to be rostering, anywhere, let alone the shallower leagues that he needs to be viable in to throw him in this first section? That is a question I'm not fully sure I know the answer to. In 56 games before getting hurt, or getting appendicitis, I guess that doesn't count as hurt, he was not good at all. Hit 206, 3 homers, 3 steals, struck out 32% of the time. But am I crazy for saying if Jordan Walker's out there, I still want to add him to my bench ideally and see if this might be finally the time he catches fire? There's still a lot that Jordan Walker does very well. He still swings the bat very hard. He hits the ball hard as well. If he ever can make more contact, which, to be fair, he did as a rookie. It was a 22% strikeout rate as a rookie, all the way up to 33% now. I still think that there's something here with Jordan Walker, and if there's playing time in the short term, there's been some injuries, right, to the Cardinals that have opened up more playing time. Lars Nootbaar hitting the IL with a rib injury. I believe is Nolan Gorman also dealing with a day-to-day issue, undisclosed, that one. Maybe a back issue there. Basically, there's playing time for Jordan Walker in the short term, and there's theoretical long-term projections about Jordan Walker. Should I go out and add him to my bench pretty much everywhere, or do we know who this guy is by now?
I wish I had more optimism. He actually wasn't originally in the Cardinals lineup yesterday. They had to scratch Gorman, which we presume was that back flaring up again. And I don't know that he's gonna, unless Gorman hits the IL, and even then, I don't know. Walker's guaranteed everyday playing time, at least against right-handed pitching. Still interesting enough that if he gets that, I would like having him on my bench. He had been recovered from the appendix thing for a bit, but they had him go to Double-A Springfield because they had him work on a swing change. Don't know exactly what that looks like. He said it's basically they had him working more on just going more direct to the ball, so his weight transfer is going towards the ball and not away from the ball. Seems pretty easy to figure that out on your own, but evidently that was an issue with him. You look at his numbers during his rehab assignment, they weren't great. He did hit a couple of home runs his last 5 games, I think, on his rehab assignment. So maybe those swing changes were starting to take hold. Hitless last night. He did have a really hard hit ball that Alec Thomas made an awesome catch in the outfield. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to have a ton of optimism with Jordan Walker right now. Yes, in deeper leagues, I would like to have him on my bench just as kind of see what happens. We also don't know exactly what the Cardinals are going to do with the trade deadline. It's possible they trade someone else and free up more at bats for him. Also possible he could get traded. Maybe the Cardinals have soured on him enough to where they could move him and he would do better with a new set of eyes on him. But yeah, basically don't have a ton of optimism right now, but in your deeper formats, sure, if you have a free bench spot, he's worth a roll of the dice.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, he's graded well on the pitch selection metrics, and he hits the ball hard. That's most of the puzzle on offense, and he hasn't had permanent swing and miss issues. They're more of a recent thing. So hearing that he's doing a swing change too, I just don't want to quit on this guy. It might not be for another year or two before he puts it all together, if he ever does, but there's too much here for me to just give up on him at age 23. But let's give up on the priority hitters, move over to some priority pitchers. Who is your first name here, Ryan?
Yeah, a guy I can't give up on certainly is Zebby Matthews, going back into the Twins rotation off the IL on Saturday today. Unfortunately, that start's going to come at Coors Field. So I might keep him benched for that first start back, particularly because he's not totally stretched out yet. It's because he just went 4 innings in his lone rehab start, but it was a really good rehab start. Didn't allow a single hit, struck out 9 over those 4 innings at AAA St. Paul. 5.221 ERA so far at the major league level this season, but 25 strikeouts in 19 innings. You look at his 13 major league starts, the ERA is a little high, but more importantly, at least to me, is the 26.2% strikeout rate, just a 7.3% walk rate. Look at his numbers at AAA this year. They've been awesome. 1.72 ERA, 47-9 strikeout to walk rate over 36 2/3 innings. So, I mean, I'm still very much a very big Zebby Matthews fan. I think there could be home run issues. He's an extreme fly ball pitcher. And you could make an argument that he's maybe around the plate a little too much. That could lead to those home run issues along with the fly ball tendencies, but he's a proven bat misser at every level. He's displayed velocity increase this season. I think he could really have a good second half as a guy who's not universally rostered yet. And coming back from a kind of scary arm injury, or at least it was to me when he went down, but he didn't wind up missing that much time and looked great in his lone rehab start. So it looks like he's put that behind him. So Zebby Matthews, yeah, I think he's definitely needs to be picked back up where he's available. Might keep him on your bench if you can for this first start, but I would be wanting to start him next week.
Yeah, sounds right to me. I can't quit Zebby Matthews yet either. Going to be another year or two before that. He hasn't been around that long. He deserves the chance to see if it's going to work out with an extended run in the Twins rotation. My next priority pitcher here is Brandon Walter of the Astros, who previously, his only major league experience before this year was 9 bad relief outings with the Red Sox back in 2023, had a 6.26 ERA. Then he missed all of last season with a shoulder strain. And then he opened this year as a 28-year-old at the AAA level, but made his Astros debut in late May, became a regular in the rotation since the start of June. And it's now been enough starts that I would seriously consider Brandon Walter even in some of these shallower leagues. Previously, I thought he was maybe a deep league streamer and that's it. But through 8 starts, Brandon Walter has a 3.66 ERA with XFIP and Sierra saying he should actually be around 290, which is remarkable. And that's because he's got an above average strikeout rate, 25%, and a 1.6% walk rate. Brandon Walter just does not walk anybody, showing great control. Also has an above average ground ball rate of 48%. By the way, that excellent walk rate has helped keep his whip all the way down at 0.96. Brandon Walter just not giving up base runners. How much do we trust a 28-year-old lefty who throws 91.8 miles per hour and has never been a major league starter before his age 28 season? I don't think we trust him very much. That's why we didn't mention him, really, before either of his previous 8 starts. But man, when you can go 8 starts into your season with a 1.6% walk rate, I should look up the exact number of walks that is, but it's got to be like, it's 3 walks in 8 starts. When you can do that, and you can also keep the ball on the ground, and you can also miss bats an above average clip. I mean, I think we got to start noticing this guy, even if all the typical prospect pedigree angles say there's no reason to look at, again, a 28-year-old who's starting for the first time and doesn't have elite stuff. But he's, somebody who mixes in a lot of pitches, 5 different pitches thrown at least 13% of the time, and they go where he wants them to go. So I don't know. Is 8 starts for you enough, Ryan, to consider Brandon Walter even in shallower formats?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the numbers with Brandon Walter, both from the major league level this season and the minors, and don't consider the age and the repertoire, like he's a guy you would definitely want. I don't know how long he can keep it going, but I mean, he knows that he shouldn't be relying on his fastballs too much because he just doesn't have the velo, and he's thrown that 4-seamer just 17% of the time, sinker 13.7% of the time. Those were his 4th and 5th most used pitches. He's actually gotten awesome results in the 4-seamer, giving up 2 hits all season on that pitch, and has a 34% whiff rate, which is really high for a 4-seamer. But yeah, he's kind of pitching backwards, I guess, and has always had great control at every level. Don't know if he's going to be missing a bat per inning still. Be able to continue that over the long haul, but maybe the Astros have just figured out the right pitch mix for him. Maybe he's just figured out the right pitch mix. So, I mean, I would be wanting to roster him. He's the type of guy that like you want to roster, but probably okay to bail on him if he puts together a couple really bad outings in a row.
Yeah.
But he's interesting enough that I think he should be rostered at this point.
All right. You got another priority pitcher for us?
Yeah, Shane Bieber. Maybe time to stash Shane Bieber. Return from Tommy John surgery looks to be on the horizon. 2 rehab starts. He hasn't given up a run. 10 strikeouts, just 1 walk over 4 and a third rehab innings. Should note that those 2 rehab starts both came in the complex league against rookie hitters. So I don't know how much we can read into that. He also had a 6-week-ish shutdown period with elbow soreness. Not great when you're coming back from Tommy John, but all signs seem to point to that being a minor thing, and they were just being cautious with that. Having some elbow soreness post Tommy John, not necessarily an abnormal thing, and they can just maybe some scar tissue breaking up, and he can eventually move past that. I think the ultimate ceiling with Shane Bieber just boils down to what his velocity is going to be post Tommy John. I mean, if it's closer to that 94 miles per hour he had when he won a Cy Young, you could be talking about one of the better pitchers in baseball. If it's more like the 92 or a little under that he was last year before getting hurt, the ceiling is lowered significantly, but he has shown the ability, even with diminished velocity, to still be a must roster in fantasy leagues. It's not going to be a guy everyone can afford to roster right now. He's still at least a few weeks away, but maybe late July, early August, he can join the Guardians rotation. And what does the workload look like down the stretch? Probably abbreviated, but he's good enough to where if you have that roster space, I think now is the time you need to be stashing him.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. The floor is still 0 here with Shane Bieber. I mean, anybody coming back from Tommy John surgery in their first year has a very low floor. We've seen that with Sandy Alcantara, for example, and the fact that Bieber's had 1 setback already. I mean, 1 more setback and we just don't see him this season. Right. That's very much on the table. But when I think about stashing a player, there better be a real upside that makes the downside worth considering. And certainly a former Cy Young winner like Shane Bieber comes with real upside, and the fact that there's, now an end date for when he has to be back by, assuming he's healthy, right? Rehab assignments, they run for 30 days. So his has started. So he will be back within a month unless he's hurt again. So I think that means that's good enough for me to go stash Shane Bieber. My last 2 priority pitchers here are going to be guys that I previously mentioned in the deep league pitchers section, but who have done enough to convince me that I would actually consider them in shallower formats. Starting with Quinn Priester. who just struck out 10 Dodgers in 6 shutout innings, 3 hits, 0 walks yesterday in the first game of the second half. It's actually his second double-digit strikeout performance in his last 4 outings. He struck out 11 Rockies in 7 shutout innings with just 1 hit in his final start of June. That was, to be fair, in Milwaukee, not Colorado, but still a very impressive performance. And Quinn Priester, like I said, he's somebody who has been a viable deep league guy, I think, for several months now. I think there's been enough to want him as a streamer. And I think there's now enough to want him in many more formats than that. A 3.33 ERA is outperforming the estimators, but not by that much. 363 xFIP, 379 SIERA. If he falls back to those numbers, I think Quinn Priester is still totally fine option in a 12-team league. Not an elite strikeout guy, but this is somebody whose strikeout rate sat at 15% his first 2 years as a major leaguer. This year, the Brewers have gotten him all the way up to 20%, which is below average, but pretty close to average. And when you combine that with very good ground ball numbers, 58%, that's a profile that works. You know, his previous 15% strikeout rate doesn't really work even with top of the scale ground ball numbers. But if you're merely below average and you're keeping the ball on the ground very well, that's a profile that we've seen work for a long time at the major league level. And I think it's going to keep working with Quinn Priester. The Brewers have made some tweaks to his repertoire this year. They took away his 4-seam fastball. He's throwing more sinkers, also added a cutter as his secondary fastball. And the new approach seems to be working. And so I can get behind Quinn Priester as a legitimate shallow mixed league option. I still might be scared of him against some of the league's best offenses. I really want my guys to miss more bats if they're facing, you know, the Yankees or the Dodgers or whatever. But a ground ball specialist who legitimately is a specialist and has some bat missing ability, that works for me, even a 12 team. Does it work for you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, he did get those 10 strikeouts against the Dodgers too, and only 77 pitches.
True. Look at me saying don't start him against the Dodgers 1 minute after telling you just how well he did against the Dodgers. Good memory.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what him just showing that he has the ability to have those kinds of strikeout games makes him certainly even more interesting. He was already bordering on must roster just because he'd been so great at run suppression for a while now. And if he can raise that ceiling with some strikeout upside, that's even more encouraging. Brewers have garnered a well-earned reputation with pitching at this point, and looks like they might have figured something out with Quinn Priester. So I would want to have him rostered for sure. Speaking of strikeouts, another guy coming back from injury, Spencer Arrighetti, has joined AA Corpus Christi. Has not made a rehab start yet, but that seems like that could occur this weekend at some point or shortly thereafter. This is a guy we were pretty excited about going into this season. Had 171 strikeouts in 145 innings in his rookie season last year. That included 4 double-digit strikeout games, including 3 and 5 August starts when he was on a ridiculous run of swing and miss. And the ERA overall in the season wound up a little over 4.5, but you look at his second half, he had a 3.18 ERA along with 78 strikeouts in 65 innings. So really like Spencer Arrighetti from a bat missing perspective. Was much better at run suppression in the second half last season. It's going to take him a little while to get back. We're looking at maybe it's kind of a similar timeline to Shane Bieber. Maybe late July, probably more early August, mid-August maybe. But he's a guy I would like to stash as well if I have the roster space, especially if I'm in need of strikeouts.
Yeah, he's going to end up missing. Well, he's already missed more than 3 months. He's going to miss nearly 4 with that broken thumb suffered in batting practice, was struck by a batted ball in the outfield. Just a very weird injury. Not one that we have a lot of experience with, trying to figure out just how much it will affect him after he comes back. You know, it's not an elbow or a shoulder, but you got to figure if he looks good on his rehab assignment, then he should be good to go and should be quite helpful over the final couple months. Rounding out our priority ads, I'm going with another pitcher here who has moved into this section for me after earning a nod a few weeks ago as a deep league pitcher, and that is Trevor Rogers. I am buying in to the point where I would happily pick up Trevor Rogers in a shallower mixed league. The guy has a 1.53 ERA and an 0.82 whip through 6 starts. So in some of those leagues where people just sort by current stats and pick up the guys with the best numbers, Trevor Rogers is long gone. Those who have been following Trevor Rogers more closely would have been wanting to see a little bit more from him after a very disappointing campaign last year. But I think that we've seen enough through 6 starts. He just struck out a season-high 8 against the Marlins, his former team, in his last start before the break. Trevor Rogers, somebody who, remember back to early in his career, we were pretty excited about what he could do. He actually missed a ton of bats as a rookie in 7 starts, a 30% strikeout rate, and in his first full season, 28.5%. Then the strikeouts more or less disappeared, dipped all the way to 17% last year, while he also walked 10% of opposing batters. Nothing was going right for him last year, but 24% strikeout rate and a 7.5% walk rate through 6 starts this year. That's a good combination, both slightly better than average, and a 48% ground ball rate, slightly better than average as well. This looks like a guy who is pitching pretty well across the board. And to top it all off, I wonder if he gets traded to a contender, some team that gives him more winning chances. I wonder if the Orioles can wind up acquiring Rogers for 2 players they probably wish they still had in Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers, but then flipping him again 1 year later for players who are roughly as good. It's possible. If I'm the Orioles, I'd certainly look to be shopping him. So I think Trevor Rogers, again, been good before, looks good now, and could have better winning chances in the future. That's enough for me to recommend him in 12-teamers, although, again, like with Quinn Priester, I'd still probably hide him against the toughest opposing offenses.
Yeah, how quickly things can change. I mean, a month ago, we were only narrative with Trevor Rogers was still how the Orioles got fleeced in that trade, and that still probably a trade that they're going to wind up regretting, I'm guessing. But now he's being seen as a potential trade chip to go to a contender. So that's how quickly things can turn for you. And I agree that he's pretty much must roster at this point. He did have some pretty favorable matchups of late, so I would be a little nervous about starting him against better offenses. But yeah, Trevor Rogers needs to be rostered pretty much everywhere now.
When you said that's how quickly things can turn for you, I wondered if you were about to launch into some sort of motivational spiel with friendly matchups. You too, like Trevor Rogers, can turn things around. But we are going to move on to our Deep League ads right after this brief message from our sponsor, Home Run Forecast. Can the weather really help a baseball travel further? Turns out, yes, the air can affect how far a baseball carries by up to 20%. Home Run Forecast uses real-time weather data to rate each game's conditions for ball flight, assigning every matchup a 1 to 10 score based on how home run friendly the air is. On the premium site, you'll get game-by-game, hour-by-hour index values, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction, roof status, and more, all for less than $6 a month. Check it out at homerunforecast.com and gain a weather edge before first pitch. And welcome back to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer here. Moving on to our Deep League ads. And as mentioned at the top of the show, we do kind of have to scrounge around for some names this week. Not many games have happened since our show last weekend, so take a listen back to that one if you're looking for a few more names. But we'll do what we can here, Ryan. Who have you dug up for our Deep League pitchers?
Yeah, there's going to be kind of a theme for my Deep League pitcher recommendations this week. It's relievers that could find themselves with closing opportunities soon as a result of the trade deadline. First one is Dennis Santana. Is David Bednar going to be traded to a contender? Santana has been great in a setup role, 1.56 ERA, 0.82 whip, 29 to 7 strikeout to walk rate over 40 and third innings. Dating back to last season, he's got an ERA just over 2, whip well under 1 with the Pirates. Strikeouts way down with him, but walks are also way down. Obviously, that whatever mix he's figured out has worked with him. The trade-off with the fewer strikeouts and fewer walks has worked. One problem is Dennis Santana could also be traded, and he almost surely would not close for his new team. But he does have arbitration eligibility next season and still should be relatively cheap. So maybe the Pirates would prefer to hang on to him. It's going to be a totally league-dependent situation and a how many roster spots do you have available situation. But if you have the space, I think Dennis Santana is worth stashing for the potential of saves over the final 2 months.
Yeah, this relief stash game just before the deadline is a tough one because of exactly what you mentioned there, where Santana could just get traded himself.
Yep.
I think it's a low return game to be playing. I think if you stash 5 relievers across 5 leagues that you hope might close, you might only hit on one of them, but saves are so precious on the wire that if you have the spot to do it, I think Dennis Santana certainly makes sense in that category. I will give you a name that I will not very warmly endorse here, but Alan Winans of the New York Yankees looks like he could be entering the rotation, ? He has been officially promoted by the Yankees today. It was thought that he might just be up to take a long relief role out of the bullpen, in which case want no part of Alan Winans for fantasy purposes, and I might want no part of him, period. The numbers have not been particularly good. 46 and a third career major league innings. He has a 7.38 ERA. ERA estimator's better than that, but not good. But the thing is, what if he's starting for the Yankees? A pitcher who's starting for the Yankees, I would have to pay a little bit of attention to in deeper leagues, and he might be a rotation member because the Yankees are already dealing with plenty of injuries, are now also dealing with Cam Schlittler's arm soreness. So far, he's only been pushed back, has not yet been put on the IL, but anytime a pitcher is dealing with arm soreness, got to be aware of that possibility. Max Fried is out, but only dealing with a blister. So maybe there's just one spot here. Maybe it's just a temporary spot until Luis Gil comes back, but it looks like Alan Winans, or maybe it's JT Brubaker. I mostly threw him on here to point out the fact that the Yankees rotation is a mess at the moment. We mentioned Luis Gil last week. I would be grabbing Luis Gil in leagues where I can afford to stash him, and elsewhere in those deeper leagues, I do want to keep an eye out on Winans or Brubaker or whoever it is, because starting for the Yankees is a pretty good start. You get a pretty good lineup behind you. And I should point out, Winans in 60 and 2/3 innings at the AAA level this year has a 1.19 ERA with some very good strikeout and walk numbers as well. So wouldn't necessarily look at his previous major league track record and say he has no chance. So keep an eye out on news for this Yankees rotation. Maybe add Alan Winans and maybe learn how to pronounce his name. Over to you, Ryan, for the next deep league pitcher.
Yeah, sticking with the relief theme, I've got Jose Ferrer of the Nationals. Kyle Finnegan could get traded at the deadline. He also might just wind up losing his job because he's been pretty bad lately. So maybe he won't have a ton of appeal at the trade deadline, but is an impending free agent, so maybe he will get dealt. And Jose Ferrer could slide into that closer role. Got a high ERA at 5.18, but his 3.05 Sierra kind of is a better representation of how he is pitched. Unfortunately, doesn't miss a ton of bats, but if you are going to be below average in terms of missing bats, especially for a late inning reliever, you better be really good at other things, and Jose Ferrer is. He's got a 94 walk rate in the 94th percentile, ground ball rate in the 99th percentile, barrel rate in the 97th percentile. Also one of the hardest throwers in baseball, regularly hits triple digits. Does have some splits issues. He's a lefty who does much better against lefties, so maybe it would be more of a mix and match situation for interim manager Miguel Cairo, but I do think Jose Ferrer probably is the most interesting arm in that bullpen. And again, it's not a player that everyone can afford to stash. It's a low probability that he's going to get the closer job and be great down the stretch, but it is a possibility, and he's got some upside. So deep league ad if you can afford to roster him.
Yeah, checks out here. I could definitely see the Nationals dealing Kyle Finnegan, and Ferrer looks like the next man up, most likely. By the way, Winans, I figured out the first syllable is Y, but I don't know if that's Nans or Nons. Hopefully, this doesn't turn out to matter very much, but Alan Winans, maybe. Anyway, the next name here for me is Brad Lord of the Nationals, and I'll give you the headlines of his last two notes on RotoWire. We had, right at the end of the first half, emerging as bullpen weapon, and then we have right at the start of the second half, stepping into rotation. So Brad Lord, you can get the sense from these two, is a pitcher that the Nationals want to use somehow. This is a guy who last year in 25 starts in the minors had a 2.43 ERA, just a 25% strikeout rate, not dominant, but had pretty good minor league numbers. This year, 65 innings, 6 of them starts. I'm not sure how many of those are real, genuine starts, though. Some of them just 3-4 innings, but he does have a 5 and a 6 on there. He's basically been, I guess you could say, a swingman this season. 3.46 ERA in 65 innings. 21% strikeout rate is right around just below league average. 8.5% walk rate, right at league average. And then a slightly above average ground ball rate, 46.5%. None of those stats I just cited are all that exciting, but they're all pretty competent. And if Brad Lord is indeed stepping into the rotation for the Nationals, and you could get 10 weeks of a fairly competent guy who's still 25 years old, wasn't a big prospect necessarily, an 18th round pick, somebody who gets by more on funk than anything else, but a 95 mile per hour fastball. This is not some soft tosser. So it's an interesting enough rookie pitcher here who has an opportunity in front of him. Probably looks like he's going to be in the rotation with Shinosuke Ogasawara sent down. Although, again, remember that he was emerging as a bullpen weapon late in the first half. Could also be a candidate, theoretically, if Kyle Finnegan gets dealt. Maybe it's Lord in the 9th inning, although not if he's already established himself as a starter by then. So something there maybe for deeper leagues with Brad Lord. You got one more deep league pitcher for us?
So Shinosuke Ogasawara, you just rattled off without any issues, but
yeah,
Alan Winans it's just really tripping you up.
With Japanese names, they're just exactly how they look. You just read all the letters and you'll get there. But I don't know if it's Winons or Winons. I'll have to ask him.
Well, I'm going to stick with relievers once again. I'm going to give you two names this time, but they're in the same bullpen. The Braves bullpen with Pierce Johnson and Dylan Lee. Raisel Iglesias is looking like a pretty good bet to be traded. Lost his closer job briefly earlier, but Iglesias has been awesome for the last 6 weeks or so. I think he's got a 16 appearance scoreless streak. Hasn't given up a hit, maybe his last 6 or so appearances. So he's certainly looking like a pretty sought-after bullpen arm. Which of these two guys is going to wind up with closer opportunities? I think I would lean Johnson out of the two, mostly because he's pitched a lot better of late. 0 earned runs over his last 11 appearances. Overall in the season, 2.60 ERA, 38-10 strikeout to walk rate over 32 2/3 innings. Dylan Lee, as I mentioned, struggled a little bit lately. He's got a 9 ERA in July, but overall still been really good. 2.53 ERA, 46-11 strikeout to walk rate over 42 2/3 innings. He is the lefty, but doesn't really have major splits issues. I would lean Johnson out of those two guys if I'm stashing one of them, but I think they're both viable to stash in certain situations. Also would keep an eye on Joe Jimenez. He's looking like he could come back for maybe the last 6 weeks or so of the season. And going into the season, he probably would have been next in line for saves. He's been awesome during his time with the Braves, coming back from knee surgery. But if he looks good on his rehab assignment and Iglesias is indeed traded, possible that Joe Jimenez could wind up with saves as well. So if you're digging really deep, look his way as well.
Yeah, I could definitely see Atlanta being one of the better bullpens to find that stash in, although could be either one of those guys and probably the one that you don't pick up. Unfortunately, that's how it goes. But I get behind both of those stashes there. Let's move on to the deep league hitters, where we've had a comment about my first guy on the list here, ADC, Adrian Del Castillo. He is back for the Arizona Diamondbacks. We actually saw Del Castillo last year in 25 games. He hit .313 with 4 homers, although he did strike out 32% of the time. Del Castillo, an interesting player. He is nominally a catcher and was starting some games behind the plate in the minors this season, but he's one of those catchers who's mostly a hitter, and you got to wonder, are they going to keep him around as a backup catcher type, a good offensive backup catcher, or are they going to try to convert him into some sort of mostly DH, as happens with a lot of guys in this archetype? Still not sure with Del Castillo. We didn't have the chance to find out earlier this season because he missed the start of the year with shoulder issues and then also missed time with a back issue. This is why I think, well, this could be why we didn't see him earlier during the start of Gabriel Moreno's extended absence here. Maybe the reason we didn't see him earlier was also because the Diamondbacks don't view him as a catcher. He appeared as a DH in the first game of the second half, and he only got the call up because Pavin Smith, a DH, not a catcher, is out with an oblique issue. And so that theoretically means Del Castillo's only up temporarily while the Diamondbacks need a DH. But if this is a team that sells pieces at the deadline, there's just more spots open in the lineup in the last 2 months of the season. That's a pretty foreseeable future for Arizona. And Del Castillo is the type of hitter that they'd be trying to give more at-bats to if and when that happens. If he weren't eligible at catcher, I'm not sure how excited I would be to pick him up just because I don't know about the playing time. And to be fair, I don't know about the talent either. But if you can get a catcher-eligible guy who does have a promising bat, it's, I think, a power over hit type of bat because he struck out 28% of the time in the minors this year. Again, it was 32% of the time in the majors last year. Mostly has had bad strikeout issues at most stops, although, to be fair, at AAA last year, he was making a good amount of contact. And he did go 3 for 4 in his season debut yesterday. So making contact so far through one game at the big league level. Uncertain talent, but an interesting talent for sure. And with the temporary playing time, and again, that catcher eligibility, I go grab Del Castillo now and just see where this one goes. If he's playing 3 times a week, that's already good enough for your second catcher spot in a deeper 2-catcher format. And I think there's a lot of upside beyond that. Do you like Del Castillo?
Yeah, not difficult to envision a scenario where he gets everyday playing time in the final 2 months. I mean, Josh Naylor looks like a pretty good bet to be traded.
Yep.
Pavin Smith, when he does come back, shift him to first base, put Del Castillo at catcher. Then, of course, Pavin Smith is coming back from injury himself. Gabriel Moreno is still injured. So, yeah, it's not too difficult to envision every day, or at least 5 games a week starts for Del Castillo. And he does have some real upside with the bat. Another guy with upside coming back from injury, Luke Keeschel of the Twins, began a rehab assignment yesterday. Returned before the end of July from that forearm injury, looking possible. Looked really good early on before getting hurt with the Twins. 3 doubles, more walks than strikeouts, went 5 for 5 and stolen base attempts in 7 games with the Twins. Been a great on-base guy in the minors, 415 OBP on the farm, good pop, good speed. Also has already proven that he's wants to be super aggressive in terms of running with the Twins. That's great to see. The Twins technically are in the running for a wild card still, I guess, but sure seems like they're probably going to sell at the deadline, or at least a soft sell. So you could definitely see Keishel getting regular at-bats down the stretch for them. And he's got some real upside, particularly from a fantasy perspective, because could provide a little bit of everything. Gets on base, has a little bit of pop, and as I mentioned, has speed and has been aggressive on the bases so far. So really like him as a potential difference maker over the final couple months of the season.
Yeah, and I know James Anderson is a Luke Keishel fan as well. He ranks 16th on James's top 400 prospects, which, by the way, were updated just yesterday. Go to rotowire.com. You can use code YouTube15 for 15% off a subscription if you're interested in checking those out. Going to move on to another deep league name here. Although, should we throw in this question in the chat? Not quite some deeper league names, but Lawrence Butler or Elliot Ramos, are they droppable for someone like Austin Hayes or Taylor Ward? Also curious if Wilson Contreras is droppable now that Ivan Herreras is back for the IL. Tough to drop William Contreras, I think, but either of the other two, I think I am inclined to hold on, but that might be me being too passive in these shallower leagues where you've got guys like Taylor Ward available. Would you be making any of those moves?
I would be okay with cutting Ramos. I don't think the upside with him is as high as it is with Butler. I'm okay with playing a hot hitter, hot hand type situation with either Hayes or Ward there. Butler, though, I would hang on to him as well as William Contreras.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. All right, let's get back to my deep league name here, and that is Rowdy Tellez, who maybe I have too much of an affinity for because he's named Rowdy and because he's not shaped like most baseball players. He's shaped more like me, but Rowdy Tellez can hit the ball hard. He's got a 16% barrel rate this year. He actually doesn't strike out that much for his career, a 23% strikeout rate. So far for his career hasn't really added up to somebody who deserves everyday playing time for more than his best season back in 2022. And in fact, this year he had been out of a job, but he signed a minor league deal with the Rangers at the start of July after getting released by the Mariners. And he got his call at the start of the second half here with Jake Berger out with a quadriceps strain. Not sure how long Berger's injury is. I don't see a grade on that one, if it's one of these backdated, only out 7 days kind of deals, or if Rowdy Tellez could have plenty of runway in front of him. But if he does, if he's on the large side of a platoon, I mean, it's discussed pretty often in these deeper leagues that it's really hard to find power on the wire, right? There are these part-timers who come up and can run and play defense and work their way into number 9 hitter roles for a bit. You can find speed, but finding legitimate power on the wire is rare. Rowdy Tellez has legitimate power. It's 11 homers in 188 plate appearances so far this year. That's, more than 30 homer power if you prorate that over a full season. So an incomplete player, certainly, but if you're looking for some pop, Rowdy Tellez is probably going to be one of the louder power bats who enters the fantasy relevance in these last 10 weeks or so.
Speaking of pop, I wasn't necessarily expecting that from your former Philly, Cody Clemens, but
yeah,
he's providing that with the Twins. Seems to have kind of inched ahead of Ty France at first base against righties. He's also getting plenty of reps at second base as well. Has the ability to play third base, left field, right field. So he's getting the playing time especially against right-handed pitching, and 12 home runs and 170 plate appearances this season for the Phillies and Twins. And the batted ball data backs it up. 51.8% hard hit rate, 93.9 mile per hour average exit velocity, 13.6% barrel rate. He's also an extreme fly ball hitter and an extreme pull hitter. So he takes advantage of that hard contact. The swing and miss can be a problem. He's not hitting for a good average. That's not what you want to target Cody Clemens for. And long term, don't know what this is going to look like, but it's the profile that a kind of profile that should continue to hit for power as long as it keeps going in this direction. And playing time could be opened up even more, as I mentioned, if the Twins do ultimately sell at the deadline. Offers multi-position eligibility, so especially in your weeks when the Twins face a lot of right-handed pitching, Cody Clemens looks like a guy to roster.
Yeah, a pretty useful part-time player, whether that's a pretty useful bench option or a pretty useful platoon bat. I'm not totally sure, but while he's filling that pretty useful platoon bat role and looking pretty useful in it, 12 homers in 170 plate appearances, that's even more power than Rowdy Tellez has shown. So, yeah, I would go get Cody Clemens. My final deep league hitter here does not have that kind of power. Adam Frazier. Not a very exciting name to end the show on, 33-year-old Adam Frazier, but he was just dealt from Pittsburgh to Kansas City over the break. Kansas City has gotten almost no production from their outfielders, especially left field, and I think that means Adam Frazier should have the opportunity to play pretty regularly in left. He is competent. He's not much more than that, and I should note he did not start the first game of the second half, so you'll want to actually see him start a game this weekend before going out and picking him up. But somebody who puts the ball in play a good amount, a 14% strikeout rate for his career. It's 17% this year. It's some of the weakest contact you'll ever see. He's got a 1% barrel rate and a 20% hard hit rate this year. But if the everyday playing time is there, that matters in deeper leagues. Or if it's not every day, at least the large side of a platoon, Frazier should give you a decent enough batting average, some speed. He's up to 7 steals this year. Never had more than 11, but feels like he could give you a good 6 more the rest of the year. Not a very exciting player, but somebody who is likely available pretty much everywhere because he'd fallen into a true bench role in Pittsburgh and looks like he's going to actually play in Kansas City. Other names I could have thrown out there would be Graham Pauley stepping up for Connor Norby in Miami. Taylor Trammell. He has opportunities opening up due to injury. I forget what was the latest injury there. The Jake Myers injury, I believe, in Houston opens up playing time for Taylor Trammell, but he really has not shown that he can hit at the big league level. And then also Blake Perkins and or Jake Bowers, we mentioned earlier. Sal Frelick injured. A couple other names to round things out there who I could have thrown on. Again, we're really scrounging and scraping the scraps here because there's only been 2 games since our previous show last week. But that's pretty much it, Ryan. Let's throw in one more question, though, so we can end with a discussion of actually good players. The question is, will either Emmanuel Clase or Joan Duran get traded, or both? If they do get traded, Cade Smith and Griffin Jacks do look like good stashes. We didn't mention either of those guys when you were going through some reliever stashes earlier in the show, but do you think Clase or Duran are likely enough to get traded that stashing the guys right behind them makes sense?
It seems like it's probably unlikely with both, but I could certainly, there's enough smoke that it's not too difficult to envision it happening. But as Charlie mentioned, Cade Smith and Griffin Jacks could also potentially get traded as well.
Right.
Griffin Jack's probably more likely of the two to get traded. I think he's closer to free agency. If you're digging even deeper in those bullpens, Hunter Gaddis, Louis Varland, potential stashes, but you're talking about at least 3-4 down on the closer depth chart. So it's special circumstances if you can afford to stash, go that deep with your stashes. But yeah, certainly situations to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a low probability game trying to find these reliever stashes because the guy you stash may well get traded too. Teams acquire setup men, not just closers. But Cade Smith in particular, I think is a very good pitcher who I've been very happy to have in deeper leagues. Is just whenever I don't have 7 good starters I like. I'll throw in Cade Smith as the third reliever. Griffin Jacks, when he's on, is in that tier as well. So some decent names to know there too. But that's going to do it for today's show. Next week, Ryan, we will have had 7 days worth of games, so hopefully we'll have a little bit more turnover. But thank you to our listeners. Thanks to everybody who hung out in the chat. Thank you to our sponsors, NFFC and Home Run Forecast. And the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast will be back tomorrow. Jeff and Scott talking about who they picked up here on RotoWire.